What was it like to be a Tudor sailor? What motivated Tudor explorers to colonise the new lands? These are just some of the questions Jen Ager has been asking her Year 5 class during an intensive Tudor History Week.
Jen, I've had an absolutely wonderful 2 days in your classroom.
Primary history specialist Dr Hilary Cooper is passionate about pupils getting to grips with the underlying values and perspectives in history.
Dark classroom, candles on the table, absolute magic and silence. We had Captain Francis Drake being interviewed by sailors, and that really is history to me.
Jen's class has taken a week-off timetable to study the Tudors. In this depth study, they've used a wide range of activities to learn about attempts to colonise Roanoke and life on board a Tudor galleon.
Hard tack.
And the children got very involved in making it. It was part of the cross-curricular approach.
The thing that comes to mind is the interactive link with the Maritime Museum in Greenwich.
They interacted with the camera, they enjoyed it. It was something very powerful to have in the classroom.
And of course in the afternoon there was the windy trip down into the wilds of Virginia.
They discuss methods to make history fun and accessible in Key Stage 2 and approaches teachers can use to bring moral issues or values into the history curriculum.
Values, as you know as well as I do, are supposed to underpin the whole of the national curriculum. And we've decided that history and geography, being humanities, are really the subjects where we should look at how the values are integrated into those subjects. How did you manage to work them into the subject, into a history topic?
For the children to recognise the impact that Tudor exploration may have had today, I started thinking of all the values that I thought were specific to that time era. Then along comes Sir Walter Raleigh and says, "I will name this land Virginia after my Queen Elizabeth." I wonder what the native people thought of that. What would you think?
They might have been a little bit cross because they'd given it their own name and then he comes along and names it again.
And for the children to understand the importance of those values and issues in today's society, then surely it makes sense for them to look at them in history so that they're looking at where they've come from and what people have done in the past and the impact that that's had on today. What would you have done if you didn't have any food?
I would have just gone and asked.
Yes, and a good example of that, I thought, was the children were very articulate about the indigenous people of Roanoke and how they might have felt about people coming with different values, different clothes, different behaviour.
You're going to feel really annoyed with them.
They were very impressed that they were welcome to start with, but they could well understand why they might not have been ultimately welcomed by them.
Bringing all these new English ways into their country.
Children need to be given dilemmas to talk about and discuss, dilemmas that probably don't have a right or wrong answer. And you'd actually selected a number of situations where there were dilemmas and the children really were examining them and exploring them. And that's not just teaching them about Roanoke, it's teaching them about how they can actually discuss in terms of ethics and right and wrong all sorts of other current issues, and they build on that as they get older and do it in more complicated ways.
Well, when they got there and the Indians were helping them, they would have been really happy that they've got native people here helping them, and then a year after, in the winter when they stole, they should have just asked, and then the Indians got really offended.
At Roanoke, it was very sunny. The local people are very nice. I really like it here and I don't want to go home. The fruit is really nice and the soil is good too.
Brilliant. Thought you'd included some great facts from listening to that tape. He talked about what life was like, he thought about the voyage, he's really missing his family.
In about the 60s, Brunner was the first person really to say that having identified what historical thinking is, its inferences from sources in order to look at change over time, the skill that teachers have, which you've certainly got, is bringing that level of academic thinking and down to children's level, which you've worked very hard at because it's quite hard in this
I think
topic.
that's been the most difficult
Yes.
part. Just thinking back, one of the things that I found quite difficult was just getting the children to place the times chronologically on a line. Is it really important for the children to retain those dates or just think of it as a block of time in history?
I think they need to know that it's a block of time. It's about 400 years ago, a long time ago. But I don't think the dates are very important beyond that. I don't remember them. I have to look them up. But you've got lots of other, much more subtle and complicated concepts of time that they were learning. Through looking at the journeys and the purposes of the journeys, you were looking at how the past was different. You were looking at continuity and change. You were talking at one point about America today and America then, and the impact of the explorations and the settlement and the causes and the effects of those journeys, which is another much more subtle thing about time and dates.
Sir Walter Raleigh named it Virginia. Do you think it might have had another name?
The native people there might have called it their own name. And other people exploring would have had their own names to call it too.
I hope I picked out all the right points for them to remember.
It was simple, but not oversimplified. You were dealing with complicated material. And I think the really important thing is there's lots of things in history that we can't know. So I think it's also really important to be probabilistic on, I think, maybe, perhaps. And you said again, we don't know what happened to the people, the settlers, after a year.
There was nobody left. But we don't really know what happened to them. So
And it's really important to recognise that there aren't rights and wrongs in history a lot of the time. That's what history's
trying to get them
about.
to think, to be independent thinkers as well, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Because so often it's a yes or a no answer,
And that's
and
why
that
history's
discussion based.
so lovely for
Yeah.
children. Everybody, different abilities, different interests, they're all entitled to a point of view. And very often it's a very good point of view.
Clothes are soaking, your hair's wet, your shoes are soggy. What are you going to do?
What might have happened to them in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean? What do you think life was like for the captain in that port?
Kirsty, do you think you could manage to eat that all day, every day for a few months?
We might need some fresh water. That might be one reason, so you could do that. Is there another reason, maybe?
There's a lot of research that has shown that teachers don't ask open questions that allow children to discuss and explore ideas. An awful lot, like 99% of the questions, a lot of teachers ask the closed questions, yes or no, to see if they've actually understood and move on to the next thing.
If you're going to build a permanent shelter, is there anything that you would need to think about?
Lots and lots of open questions in the activities and in the things that you were asking them. And what was really nice was the children questioning each other and asking each other to justify why they said something should be here rather than there.
I want to put it first. I want to put it last.
Right.
I don't think try to spread the Christian word should go last, because if you spread the Christian word, they might have just understood what they tried to come for.
And do you think they've possibly got more out of the session than me standing there and delivering and then yes?
Absolutely, because it's gone through their head and they've had to reason about it and think about it and defend it to other people. And I'm quite sure if you just told them the story in half an hour, it would have had no effect whatsoever, educationally or historically.
To spread the Christian word to the people that
Spread the Christian word to the new people, the people that are there.
And certainly you need to have an environment where everybody feels valued and not threatened and not afraid to get it wrong. If you ask children what they think an artefact is for or what they think a photograph tells them about the past, if they haven't learned the questions to ask and the way to discuss it, then they're just, oh, not a lot, why do I want to know? So they're all skills that children need to learn. One thing I was really, really pleased to see, Jen, was that you blocked out a week of time. You've started this topic before and you're going on afterwards, but you've taken this whole week to really get into this topic.
It's actually been a fantastic relief to have a week that, yes, the planning did take some time, but because I'm interested in the planning, that I haven't minded that. But I think if I'd taken these sessions that I'd done and spread it over the half term of 6 weeks, I don't think I would have gotten as many answers or as much enjoyment. I don't think they would have remembered some of the issues we'd discussed or some of the stories and some of the themes. And I don't see any harm in doing catch up with what I am planning to do for the rest of the half term next week and continuing it. And I've got my maths and I've got my literacy and I've got my science, I've got everything through this topic, so where's the harm in that?
Yes,
they're
well,
still learning.
That's where the cross-curricular bit comes in as well. It's part of the time management issue, isn't it? A lot of other areas of the curriculum that actually had come within this theme, which again is managing time economically and in a meaningful way.
What did they get if they didn't eat enough fresh fruit and veg?
They got scurvy.
What's scurvy?
Your teeth starts to fall out and your gums start bleeding.
The history topic itself, we've had lots of literacy, lots of diaries, letters, recounts, a lot of looking at chronological understanding through maths, RE, religious tolerance, PSHE, emotions and empathy for others. And it's linking it to the different learning styles again, isn't it? We've got some mathematicians in there, some scientists, so it's just making it accessible to all of the children.
I like doing different things mixed in with the Tudors, like Tudors and literacy, and it's really cool because you can do like history and all different types of things, and you learn loads.
There was reading and writing. In fact, I'm sure we could count that you covered almost all the objectives of the literacy curriculum as well. But there wasn't a great deal of reading and writing. You were doing it all through questionings, and the reading and writing often gets in the way of enjoying history for a lot of children of that age, and especially for the ones who are perhaps not quite so good at reading and writing and so on.
So even though I haven't got as much written in my history books or as much on the wall, that's still learning, isn't it? That's still
learning how to think like a historian in a historical way. What are they going to do next?
I think our next history topics, we're going to start looking at the Greeks.
So that's
the
way back.
Greeks. Yeah, yes. So even though it's not, we don't look at history, I don't think, as in this is the beginning of history and then go right the way through. It's a lot of chopping and changing. Do you think that's hard for them to pick up on? Because we're going to do Greeks next, which is well before the Tudors. But
I think some people might say so, but I think not at all, as long as you've made it quite clear what the sequence is and they understand that and the sort of time spans that we're talking about. In fact, I think they learn more by dotting it around. If you say you're going to start with the beginning, does that imply that the children are obviously younger and therefore can deal with simple things? Well, the past wasn't simple at any time. And of course, there is continuity in that you're doing the Greeks and then you're going to come back to values and things like democracy, aren't you?
Are you going to steal a treasure?
I think it would be nice to have some treasure because then I would be known as a little bit of a hero myself.
A lot of the things the children have picked up this week, it's going to be a lot easier to introduce that next time, and hopefully another focus week with the Greeks.
Again, from a different dimension and perspective, which is challenging. But it's not just progression in content that we need to say, does it need to be sequential or not? It's the progression in children's thinking, how it's looking at sources, it's looking at wider concepts of time, it's looking at different ways in which the past is interpreted. And it's the thinking they bring to bear on those questions, because it's so complex in history. There are so many strands of historical understanding, depends on the difficulty of the questions, the difficulty of the sources. But if you're actually teaching them to think in a historical way, then they're bound to be progressing. The amazing thing about you is that you're a PE specialist with children about to go and play at Wembley, and yet you've done all this wonderful history work. Have you enjoyed it yourself, or has it just been something that you have to do?
No, I have really enjoyed it. I think I've got a bit of personal interest in it now. I've had to do a lot of reading. I've had to do a lot of research, but it hasn't been a struggle. And I think what I'm keen to develop now, or to the way that I'd like it to progress further, is really thinking about the impact that it's had today on us. And that's really what ignited my interest at the beginning.
I just so much believe that teachers should get so involved. If it's interesting to you, it's interesting to them. And if it's not interesting to you, really, why should it be interesting to them? And I think it's really good for children to know that you don't expect to know all the answers, because none of us do.
So it's just generating those questions in my mind as well.
Which are interesting too. Yeah.